Hi there, Megan Thompson with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we are going to talk about managing your own stress and parenting a sensitive child who is stuck in the meltdown cycle. At MTC help parents break out of the meltdown cycle in as little as 8 weeks. What is the meltdown cycle? The meltdown cycle is a parent and family dynamic problem. It is not a child, unique to your child problem, okay? So it's so important for us to understand that if your child is struggling with daily meltdowns over the age of 4, they feel big feelings, you're noticing that they experience the world deeply, they process deep information, they may or may not demonstrate the empathy that they feel inside and so locked up for them. And they are quite challenged with managing slight changes in their routines, transitions, or in their environment. Then this is the child that we're talking about here. And these children really struggle with with meltdowns if there's an invalidating environment going on at home. Now, for you, what we know is after working with hundreds of families, breaking out of this pattern, a decade plus worth of experience, myself and my team, is that this is not for lack of trying, right? So many times you might be thinking, okay, well, my kid is hitting, kicking, screaming, yelling, throwing things, running away, saying that they don't love me or that they worry that I love them. And what happens when you hear all of these things on a daily basis? You start to get really worn down, right? You start to get very tired, very frustrated, very exhausted, and you're trying everything, right? Because as a parent who loves their children or their child, if you have the one, it is so important for you to be acknowledged in this high level of intensity. And when you hear that the parenting strategy is what breaks out of this meltdown cycle, your automatic reaction could be, "What are you doing? Why are you telling me this?" Right? Because if you're exhausted and frustrated, then that feedback's going to go straight into guilt. It's going to go into dread. It's going to go into fueling your exhaustion, overwhelm, and adding to your dissatisfaction with your skill set. And if you're noticing that this is, if you're not noticing that this is a skill set gap for yourself and for your child or children, or and for another parent in the home, if it's a 2-parent household, then it is very easy to blame yourself. Right? And to hear this feedback as blame. When we say the strategy to break out of this cycle, it is a multi-step and multi-layer process. It is so important to be paying attention to the shifts that you need to make. And the first thing that you need to pay attention to is how you're interpreting the problem, right? When we are stuck in survival mode as human beings, we will learn to isolate ourselves. We try to, we tell ourselves that we are the only ones that can solve this problem, that nobody else understands us. There's an experience that we talk a lot about in my coaching with my clients that we talk about it being perpetual uniqueness, right? When you're in survival mode, you perceive everybody else to be experiencing the world differently than you. There's an isolative experience to that, which is why depression can end up being part of this cycle as a side effect, as well as anxiety. Why is it me? Why me? What could I be doing wrong? And being stuck in a cyclical way of thinking, ruminating and worrying all day, walking on eggshells, holding your breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. If your child is demonstrating a positive behavior or behavior that you want to continue to see, it could be very easy to fall into skepticism and self-doubt, in addition to doubting your child, which obviously feels terrible as a parent. And so when we look at the experience that you're having, it is so important to understand where all of this is coming from. This is a symptom of the problem. You are not, needing to go down the rabbit hole of trying to treat your own anxiety. You have to understand that when the whole family is struggling and the whole family is looking to one child to solve the problem or as the cause of the problem, this is very anxiety producing for everybody, including your sensitive child, because highly sensitive children are the alarm bells in society. They are the fire alarm saying something's not working. And so it's really important to not blame the fire alarm for the fire, right? So when I give you this feedback and you hear me in that, it's so important to notice how to break out of a sense of self-doubt, self-blame that keeps you stuck, right? Because when we see parents who break out of this pattern effectively, they hear that message as hope and a sense of future empowerment rather than skepticism, self-doubt, worry, and fear. And that takes a lot of mindset work to really double down on that perception, right? If it's not your initial sense of self. And it also is something to be a great reminder for you that if you used to handle challenges by saying, great, where's my responsibility to address this? Where's my opportunity? How is this going to be a challenge for me to move forward and move through? Then it's important for you to notice how big and how deep the problem lies since your self-confidence and your self-concept has been impacted. And I say this frankly, because as a mental health therapist by trade and a parent coach and consultant by choice, it is so important to understand that this type of support and focus isn't covered in breaking out of the meltdown cycle and as cohesive as it should be. There are so many avenues for parents to seek support these days, right? You might be, just dialing into understanding the personality trait and observing that it's exhausting. And it could really very well be the message that you're receiving from other professionals or other resources that's just the way that it's supposed to be. Your child will be exhausting. There are things that, there are cultures in our culture, in the highly sensitive world that will speak to the belief that parenting a highly sensitive child is meant to be hard, it's meant to be frustrating, it's meant to be focused on survival, and that level of thinking is actually quite exhausting in and of itself, and as a professional to perceive your clients that way. And so it's really important to understand who you're listening to and what you're focused on, and observe what you can be inspired to think and how you can be inspired to think differently. And so this is number one. When we think about breaking out of the pattern, being able to take care of yourself is so critical, and prioritizing your needs, but it's really about prioritizing your community, recognizing how you're hearing the message that highly sensitive children can thrive, that they don't have to be the alarm bells in our society that are always setting off fire alarms, right? They can be the alarm bells in our society that inspire and influence. And that's what we know highly sensitive people who are successful and who have developed significance in their lives are capable of doing. And what we know to be true is that parents who help their sensitive children break out of this emotional cycle and therefore break themselves out of it, they realize that you go first, right? You recognize that as parents, you're the one who has to show your child how to resist falling into victimhood and helplessness and powerlessness. And that can't be a choice just by snapping your fingers and, pulling a Nike, just do it, right? It has to be an emotional process, and it has to be something that you can thoroughly commit to on a daily basis. And so self-help, self-care, prioritization needs to be something that has a really strong focus as to your commitment on why you're doing this, because otherwise it feels very selfish and it feels very superfluous, especially for many of us who were raised in suck it up culture, right? And so when we observe what's necessary to break out of patterns in the family, we have to be paying attention to what works, right? So when we look at what works to break out of this pattern, one of the key things that you're going to need to do is to change how you assume what seeking help sounds like and looks like. When the entire family needs help, you are at the forefront of that level of shifting That means that you need to be well resourced from an energy standpoint, from an emotional energy standpoint, in order to lead, right? We think about famous successful people. They take good care of their bodies, or they struggle with health concerns. And that level of influence in our society is the type of influence that you have on your sensitive child, who will have that level of influence on our society when they're successful. We know this because highly sensitive children really thrive when their potential is tapped, right? And parents are able to lead them out of that. And so if this is something that you're feeling significantly challenged with, then I encourage you to stick around. Keep listening to my show, keep diving in, watch our videos and trainings, and dive into our Facebook group, because it's really, really important to notice that you can break out of this much sooner than you think you can if you look at it from a different angle. When we look at the important piece around those resources, first and foremost, it depends on who you're listening to and who sets the tone for your expectations, for sure. Absolutely. In terms of our relationships and our families, if your family is sharing with you that your child is going to continue to struggle unless you're harder and stricter with them, then you need to have somebody else as a bug in your ear on solving this problem. And you need to be able to set clear and effective boundaries yourself on how much you take in when you're speaking about this problem with your loved ones, so that you're not absorbing other people's judgment onto your own child, whom you need to parent unconditionally, without judgment and with full compassion. And in order to do that's a skill, especially if it wasn't something that you were afforded with your parents growing up. So when we do this, it's so important to surround yourself with parents who are thinking and breaking out of those intergenerational patterns themselves. So thinking alike in that way, and not in the sense that you are becoming some sort of mindless human being who can't think for themselves, but rather a person who is feeling supported by people who are of the same mission. Right? So the mission we have here at MTC is that we help parents break out of the meltdown cycle in order to prevent highly sensitive people from committing suicide. That's our biggest mission, that we're here to eliminate suicide actions for highly sensitive people around the world by teaching families, one parent at a time, how to break out of the meltdown cycle early, right? We're talking about early prevention here. And it might not feel like early prevention if your child is already saying things like that or struggling in that way, but depending on your child's age, it is absolutely early in terms of where this can be headed. So it's so critical to understand that, as clinicians in the field working in this at this level or in higher levels of care. Over the course of our career, we've seen some pretty significant needs for sensitive children who grew up in a mismatched parenting environment. That's it. Successful families in other ways, right? Contributing to their community, contributing to their career, wanting to demonstrate love and judgment-free parenting, and just not having the skills to do that in a way that their sensitive child understands it. And the significant danger for that child's behavior ended up being too much, which led to them being cared for outside of the home, specifically in residential treatment center, where I have my high level of care experience, but also in hospital settings and in long-term, years and years and years intensive therapy. So when we think about the important piece of breaking out of this pattern much earlier, right, and noticing what's necessary for you to stop the suffering in your family, that first piece is really making sure that you make time for yourself and find a way to do that without feeling like you are robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? If you take time for yourself, your child is just going to meet you with a banging on the door and worse off because of the resources that you're tapping into, whether that be a mismatch in parenting from your spouse or co-parent or another caregiver, and really being able to speak with authority on the topic with other family members, but from a place of leadership rather than a place of dictatorship, and urgency from a place of feeling like you have to criticize other people because it's difficult for you to articulate something that you're just learning, right? So when we think about the important component there, the next piece that is critical for you, in addition to building your community, is to be able to help your child notice that they can care for themselves. So you need to lead that way, right? Your child needs to learn how to decompress throughout the day. They need to learn how to avoid saving it until they blow up, right? And so that requires you to be able to do the same. You have to develop your own emotional management skills and do that much more thoroughly and more regularly than you might think, especially if you have other children who are not highly sensitive, who may be struggling less intensely than in this dynamic. I said that on purpose. Your family is struggling. And you know it if your child is having meltdowns on a daily basis. Everybody in the family is struggling. People in the family are holding their breath. People in their family are feeling second fiddle. People in the family are feeling like they can't, be themselves around the child who's struggling the most. And that's no way to live for your family. So everybody is struggling in this dynamic, and you know it. So I'm not here to sugarcoat that, but I'm also not here to dance around that subject. So it is so important. Look at this as your pink permission slip to take time. Figure out what it is for you to really dive into a validating experience where it doesn't stop there, right? Clear and practical skills to help you break out of the emotional pattern of giving in and coddling or pressuring and requiring your child to behave in a certain way immediately. That level of space that your child needs to grow and creatively solve their problems, it takes more than just a beat for them to snap to your attention. And when you know that you're snapping at your child, whether that be verbally or physically, because you're overwhelmed, because you're stuck, because you're fried. So if you want to learn more about what we do here, how and why it's so critical for you to break out of this cycle immediately and what it takes to do that, I encourage you to go to our masterclass. Go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/5 steps and be sure to learn the exact 5 shifts that we teach our clients to break out of this meltdown cycle in as little as 8 weeks. We've helped hundreds of families do that over the years, and it is absolutely possible for you if this is the challenge that you're experiencing in your home. So look forward to serving you on that